The Chosen Season 6 has already been called the most ambitious and emotional season Dallas Jenkins has ever created, and it's not hard to see why. From the very first episode, the weight of history presses in, and every word, every silence, and every look carries the weight of eternity. This season focuses entirely on the final night before the cross, the night that changed everything. Unlike the previous seasons that spanned weeks and months, Season 6 is set almost completely in the shadow of the Crucifixion, with the story unfolding hour by hour as the darkness deepens. According to Dallas, most of the filming took place overnight, and that detail is more than just production trivia. It creates an atmosphere that mirrors the heaviness of Scripture itself. Because if you look at the Gospels, you'll notice something striking. The betrayal, the denial, the arrest, the trial, the mocking, and even the sentencing all happen in the dark. The night becomes a symbol, not only of the absence of light, but of the weight of sin and the blindness of mankind. And now, The Chosen is capturing that same haunting energy, giving us a season drenched in the very atmosphere the Bible describes. This season begins where hope and despair collide. Jesus has been arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane after pouring out his soul in prayer and surrendering his will to the Father. That moment alone has always been one of the most gut-wrenching in Scripture, because it shows us both his divinity and his humanity. The Son of God sweating drops of blood, asking if the cup could pass from him, and yet choosing obedience. That obedience leads him into chains, and from there, into the hands of those who hated him most. From the very beginning of the season, viewers will feel the injustice. Jesus is led to Annas, a former high priest who still held enormous influence, and questioned as though he were a criminal. When Jesus reminds them that he has spoken openly, that his teachings were never hidden, a guard slaps him across the face. That image, that first strike of violence against the one who healed and forgave, sets the tone for everything that follows. Because what is coming is not just an execution. It is the unraveling of humanity's cruelty against the most innocent man who ever lived. The questioning does not stop there. Jesus is taken before Caiaphas, where the Sanhedrin gathers like vultures circling their prey. False witnesses are called in, each testimony more confused and contradictory than the last. The leaders are desperate, but nothing sticks. Finally, Caiaphas himself asks the question everyone else has been avoiding. Are you the Messiah? And in that moment, Jesus speaks words that echo like thunder across history. You have said so. But I tell you, from now on you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. With those words, his fate is sealed. Caiaphas tears his robes in outrage, declaring blasphemy, and the council condemns him to death. But here's the irony. They don't actually have the power to kill him. For that, they must hand him over to the Romans. And so begins the most infamous trial in history, one that would not only test the courage of men, but expose the deepest weakness of power itself. Jesus is brought before Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, a man trapped between politics and conscience. Pilate questions him, searching for guilt, but finds none. Again and again he tells the crowd, "I find no fault in him." And yet, the voices of the mob grow louder. The Sanhedrin stirs up the people, twisting the truth, and soon the air is filled with one chilling cry, "Crucify him!" Pilate, unwilling to risk his own position, tries to pass the responsibility by sending Jesus to Herod. Herod, fascinated by stories of miracles, mocks him when no sign is given. He dresses Jesus in a robe, as if he were a fool to be laughed at, and sends him back. Pilate is cornered. The more he resists, the more desperate the crowd becomes. Finally, he tries one last tactic. During Passover, it was tradition to release a prisoner. Standing before the people, Pilate offers them a choice: Jesus of Nazareth or Barabbas, a convicted criminal. In any sane world, the choice should be obvious. But the crowd, blinded by rage and manipulation, screams for Barabbas. And so Pilate, washing his hands in front of the people, condemns the innocent Son of God to death. But here's the part that makes Season 6 so unbearable and yet so necessary. It doesn't shy away from the brutality of what follows. Pilate orders Jesus to be flogged, and this is not a punishment anyone walks away from. This was violence meant to destroy. The whip tears into his flesh. The soldiers mock him, twisting a crown of thorns onto his head. They drape a purple robe around his shoulders and bow in fake worship, laughing as they strike him. And still, through every blow, every insult, every humiliation, Jesus remains silent. He doesn't fight back, doesn't curse, doesn't resist. He bears it, step by step, knowing that each lash, each wound, is carrying the weight of the world's sin. It is this silence, this unshakable endurance, that makes the crucifixion not just a death, but the greatest sacrifice in history. Dallas Jenkins has already described this as the most emotionally and spiritually demanding season of The Chosen. And you can feel why. This is not a story you can tell halfway. This is the heart of the gospel, the moment everything has been building toward since episode 1. From the miracles in Galilee to the Sermon on the Mount, from the feeding of the 5,000 to the raising of Lazarus, every miracle, every teaching, every parable has been pointing to this. Season 6 is not simply entertainment. It is an encounter with the darkest night humanity has ever known, and the most beautiful light that would soon break through it. The journey from the trial to the crucifixion is where The Chosen Season 6 will hit the hardest, because this is where the reality of the cross begins to unfold. After Pilate gives in to the crowd and hands Jesus over, the path to Golgotha begins, and with it comes some of the most unforgettable images in all of Scripture. The Roman soldiers, hardened men who had carried out countless executions before, treat Jesus with a cruelty that is almost unthinkable. They mock him endlessly, pressing the crown of thorns deeper into his head until blood runs down his face, striking him and spitting at him as if he were the lowest of criminals. To them, he is nothing more than a condemned man awaiting death. But for us, watching through the lens of history and faith, we know the truth. They are torturing the very Son of God, the one who could summon angels at a word, and yet he endures in silence. That tension between his power and his surrender is what makes every moment of this season cut so deeply. As Jesus is led away, the brutality does not lessen. He is forced to carry the crossbeam through the streets of Jerusalem, a burden so heavy that even the strongest men would collapse beneath its weight. But he does not carry it alone. The Gospel tells us that Simon of Cyrene is pulled from the crowd, a bystander turned participant, forced to help bear the weight. That detail has always been powerful because it shows us what discipleship really is, taking up the cross and following even when you didn't expect to. And for viewers of The Chosen, that scene will no doubt feel like a mirror, reminding us that this story is not far away, not distant, but something we too are called into. This isn't just a retelling of history, it is a confrontation with what it means to follow Christ when the road leads to suffering. The crowd is relentless. Some watch in silence, horrified. Others jeer and mock, shouting insults as Jesus stumbles under the crushing weight of the wood. Every step toward Golgotha feels like another betrayal of justice, another reminder of how far humanity can fall when blinded by fear and hatred. And yet, within that sea of hostility, there are also tears. Women from Jerusalem mourn openly, and Jesus, even in his pain, turns to them and speaks, "Do not weep for me, weep for yourselves and for your children." Those words are haunting, because they reveal that even in the hour of his own suffering, he is still carrying the weight of others, still looking beyond himself, still offering truth. That moment is part of what makes this story so piercing. Jesus is never the victim of circumstance. He is the willing sacrifice, the lamb led to the slaughter, fully aware and fully committed to the purpose of the cross. When they arrive at Golgotha, called the place of the skull, the horror reaches its peak. Crucifixion was not just a form of execution, it was designed to humiliate, to terrorize, to crush both body and spirit. Victims were stripped of their dignity, nailed to wood, and left to die in agony before the eyes of a watching world. And now, in Season 6, The Chosen takes us directly into that moment. The nails are driven through his hands and feet, a sound and image that has echoed through history, and the Son of God is lifted up for all to see. The sky above is bright, but the world feels darker than it has ever been. And for the disciples who had followed him, who had believed he would be the one to redeem Israel, this moment is shattering. Everything they thought they knew is collapsing before their eyes. And for us as viewers, the heartbreak is almost unbearable, because we know he chose this. Every hammer strike was willingly endured, every insult absorbed, every wound carried not for his own sins, but for ours. The crucifixion is not just the climax of Jesus' life, it is the climax of all human history. On that cross, two worlds collide: the justice of God against sin and the mercy of God toward humanity. In that hour of suffering, the fullness of wrath and the fullness of love meet. That is why Dallas Jenkins has said this season demanded everything from the cast and crew, because how can you capture something so profound, so holy, with mere cameras and words? Jonathan Roumie, who has embodied Jesus for 5 seasons, has already spoken about how carrying this role into season 6 has been unlike anything he has done before. He said the crucifixion scenes left him drained not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. The loss of weight, the exhaustion, the tears, none of it was just acting. He described it as carrying a weight that was more than human. And anyone who has followed his journey knows that the sincerity he brings to this role cannot be faked. What we will witness in season 6 is not only performance, it is transformation. And yet, the crucifixion is not only about pain, it is also about the words that cut through the silence, words spoken from the cross that carry eternal meaning. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Imagine that, praying forgiveness over the very people who are killing you. That kind of love is beyond comprehension, and it is the center of the gospel itself. Later, as the hours drag on, he turns to the thief beside him, promising paradise. Even in agony, he is saving souls. And finally, he cries out, "It is finished." 3 words that close the chapter of suffering and open the door of redemption for the world. Those words are not a cry of defeat. They are a declaration of victory. The announcement that sin and death no longer have the final word. And as the Gospels record, the earth itself responds. The sky darkens, the ground shakes, the temple curtain is torn in 2. The death of Jesus is no ordinary death. It is the very heartbeat of salvation, and The Chosen Season 6 is bringing us face to face with it. For many of us, just the thought of seeing this on screen brings a lump to the throat, because this isn't just history, it is personal. The crucifixion is not only about what happened 2,000 years ago, it is about us, here and now. Every choice we make, every failure, every hope, every tear, it was all carried to that cross. And that is why Season 6 is unlike anything we've seen before. It isn't just telling a story, it is pulling us into the greatest sacrifice ever made. Dallas and his team know that, and that's why they've poured more into this season than any before it. Longer shooting schedules, bigger budgets, locations that carry the weight of biblical history. Every detail has been chosen with care, not to glorify pain, but to illuminate the meaning of that pain. To remind us that love is not cheap, that salvation is not easy, and that the cross is the price of grace. And as we prepare for what is to come, one thing becomes clear. The Chosen Season 6 will not leave us the same. Once we walk through this journey, once we stand at the foot of the cross with Mary, John, and the others, once we hear the final words and see the final breath, something within us will shift, because that is the power of this story. It breaks us, but in the breaking, it remakes us. And then, we reach the most painful, most devastating, yet most powerful moment in the entire story, the crucifixion itself. The Chosen Season 6 is not shying away from this. This is the scene where everything we have followed for 6 seasons comes together. Jesus has been betrayed, arrested, denied, mocked, beaten, and sentenced to die the cruelest death imaginable. The cross was not just a punishment, it was humiliation, agony, and a message from Rome that anyone who dared to challenge their power would meet the same fate. But for Jesus, it was not defeat. It was destiny. The Chosen will make us feel the weight of those final steps, carrying the cross through the streets of Jerusalem as the people watched, some weeping, others cursing, and many confused. Every glance from the disciples, every cry from the women, every blow from the soldiers will remind us of the unbearable tension of that moment. Just imagine the silence that will fall when the cross is raised. The sky darkens, the earth trembles, and hope seems to die. The disciples scatter, their dreams crushed. Mary, his mother, stands in unthinkable pain, watching her son suffer and unable to stop it. And yet, in this unbearable tragedy, we will see the greatest act of love the world has ever known. The Chosen is preparing to show us not just the death of Jesus, but the meaning behind it, the sacrifice that changes everything. We know this story, but watching it unfold in this series will feel like living it for the very first time. And let's not forget what this means for the characters we've followed since the beginning. Peter, who promised loyalty but failed, now faces the crushing weight of guilt as he realizes his denial came in the moment Jesus needed him most. Judas, who thought he was pushing for victory, now watches the devastating consequences of his betrayal. And John, the beloved disciple, stays as close as he can to the cross, holding on to every final word, every drop of meaning that falls from Jesus' lips. This isn't just storytelling, it's heartbreak, redemption, and history coming alive before our eyes. The crucifixion will not just be the climax of the season, it will be the turning point of the entire series. This is the moment where darkness thinks it has won, but in truth, it has already lost. And while the world mourns, while the disciples scatter in fear, a greater victory is already unfolding. The Chosen will capture this paradox, the unbearable grief and the hidden triumph. Viewers will be left in tears, shaken, but also with a sense of awe, because this is the center of the gospel, the center of everything. Season 6 is not holding back. It's giving us the raw, heartbreaking truth of the cross, and it will change the way we see the story forever. After the cross comes the silence. The moment Jesus breathes his last, the world of the Chosen shifts into an unbearable stillness. The Roman soldiers, who moments ago mocked him, now stare in uneasy fear as the ground shakes beneath them. The temple veil is torn, the sky is dark, and the people scatter in confusion. But for the disciples, the silence is louder than thunder. Everything they hoped for, everything they believed in, has been shattered in a single moment. They thought Jesus would overthrow Rome, that he would bring victory and glory. Instead, they are left with despair. The streets of Jerusalem grow quiet, yet the weight of grief is crushing. Mary, his mother, feels the emptiness no parent should ever endure. She had carried him as a child, watched him grow, followed his ministry, and now stands broken as his lifeless body is taken down from the cross. The tears, the anguish, the shock, the Chosen will let us feel every ounce of that sorrow, and the disciples, scattered in hiding, tremble in fear. Peter is drowning in regret, Judas is consumed by guilt, and the others don't even know where to turn. They had seen him heal the sick, calm storms, even raise the dead, and yet now he lies in a tomb, sealed away by a stone. The silence of Saturday will pierce deeper than the noise of crucifixion, because it is the silence of hopelessness. But here's the brilliance of the Chosen. It will not just show us the grief, it will make us sit in it. The writers understand that before resurrection comes sorrow, and before victory comes despair. This is where faith is tested, when all seems lost. We will watch as the disciples question everything, as the followers of Jesus are mocked and ridiculed, and as darkness spreads like a shadow over Jerusalem. And yet, beneath that shadow, the greatest light is about to break through. Season 6 will not let us rush past the pain. It will force us to feel it, so that when hope returns, it is brighter than ever. The burial itself will carry a quiet power. Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus risk everything to give Jesus a proper burial, wrapping his body with care, placing him in a tomb, even though it seems like the end. The heavy stone rolls shut, and with it, the disciples feel their future sealed away. No miracles, no teacher, no hope. Just silence. But this silence is not empty. It is waiting. It is building. It is holding its breath for what is about to come. And the chosen will make us hold ours too.